The land stretched wide and endless, golden fields shimmering under the Texas sun, and at the very heart of it all stood the Grand Whitlock Ranch, owned by the wealthiest, most stubborn, and most feared man in 3 counties, Caleb Whitlock. Known as the rich cold cowboy, Caleb carried himself with a kind of unshakable pride, the sort of pride forged by hard years, bitter loss, and a heart encased in ice. He had refused every bride who had ever been brought to him, every daughter of wealthy landowners, every eager young woman who dreamed of being the mistress of his sprawling ranch. Suitors arrived dressed in finery, carrying charm and rehearsed words, but Caleb dismissed them one by one, with nothing more than a cold glance. People whispered that he would die alone, that no woman could ever warm his frozen heart, that he was a man carved out of stone and destined to remain that way. Yet fate had other plans that arrived quietly, without ceremony. One early morning, when a young woman approached the ranch gates, her name was Eliza, though she never announced it with pride. She was not like the others. She came not in a carriage pulled by glossy horses, nor in fine silks or lace, but on foot, her shoes dusty from miles of walking, her dress plain and modest, her hands calloused from work. She had no family fortune, no dowry, no titles to impress a man of Caleb's stature. What she had instead was silence, steady eyes, and a spirit that carried a weight far deeper than riches. The ranch hands noticed her first, muttering among themselves about the audacity of a simple girl standing at the mighty Whitlock gate. Caleb himself was on the porch, broad shoulders leaning against a weathered post, his hat tipped low as he gazed across the fields. At first glance, he nearly dismissed her like all the rest, but something in her stillness caught him, a quiet strength that felt different from the shallow smiles he had long rejected. Eliza did not plead her case, nor did she charm with flowery words. She simply looked at him, her chin raised though her voice was soft. "I didn't come for your money," she said calmly. "I came because I know what it means to be alone." The words struck Caleb in a place he thought had long been buried. For years he had carried the scars of betrayal. His fiancée, once promised to him, had run off with another man, leaving Caleb bitter and unwilling to trust again. His wealth had grown, his ranch had thrived, but his heart had withered into coldness. And yet here was this woman, with nothing to gain and nothing to lose, speaking not of riches or power, but of loneliness. He tested her, as he did all who came before. He spoke with cutting words, asked if she thought she could survive the rough winds of the prairie, the endless chores, the weight of a man's mistrust. Eliza never flinched. She answered simply, never raising her voice, never faltering in her steady gaze. "I've endured harder winds than yours, Mr. Whitlock," she whispered, "and I don't fear the work of my hands. What I fear is a life without purpose." Caleb had no answer. For the first time in years, he found himself speechless. Stripped of the armor of arrogance he wore so well, days turned into weeks, and though he never openly welcomed her, neither did he send her away. Eliza worked beside the ranch hands, her presence quiet yet constant. She fed the horses, mended fences, and moved through the land as though she belonged to it. Caleb watched from afar, his coldness beginning to thaw in ways he didn't want to admit. He saw her kneel to comfort a frightened colt, her hands gentle as she whispered reassurance. He saw the way she looked at the sunset's eyes, filled not with longing for wealth, but with gratitude for the simple beauty of the land. Slowly, almost unwillingly, his heart began to stir. One evening, as the sun bled red and gold across the horizon, Caleb stood at the porch once more, and Eliza approached him quietly. There was no grand declaration, no pleading, no demand for his affection. She simply stood beside him, the silence between them comfortable, unforced. "You've refused every bride," she said softly, her eyes fixed on the horizon, "but you never asked me what I wanted." Caleb's brow furrowed, his voice low and uncertain. "And what is it you want?" Eliza turned, her expression calm, steady, unwavering. "Not your fortune, not your name, only your truth." Something inside Caleb shattered, the walls he had built for so long crumbling under the weight of her words. For the first time, he let her see him not the wealthy rancher, not the cold cowboy, but the man wounded by the past, the man who still feared betrayal, the man who longed for connection even as he denied it. And in that moment, he realized that the woman he had been waiting for was not the richest, Not the prettiest, not the boldest, but the quiet one. The one who came not to take but to share, not to demand but to give. The rich cold cowboy, who had turned away every bride, found himself unable to turn away from her. The gates of the Whitlock Ranch, once a barrier to all, stood open for Eliza, and with her presence, the frozen heart of Caleb Whitlock began to beat again, warmed not by wealth, but by the quiet strength of a woman who dared to approach. And so, dear viewers, if you enjoyed this story and want more tales filled with love, courage, and unexpected twists, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these powerful stories alive, and the next one might just be the story that touches your heart. Don't miss it. Hit that subscribe button today. Days passed slowly on the Whitlock Ranch, and the world began to whisper louder. People in nearby towns had heard about the strange, quiet woman who stayed at Caleb Whitlock's gate, working with the hands, eating simply, and never leaving. Some laughed at her, saying she would never succeed where dozens of wealthy daughters had failed. Others whispered that perhaps this silent girl carried a secret charm. Caleb himself was torn. Every day he woke with the same icy wall around his heart. But every evening he caught himself looking for her, watching as she moved through the land with grace, never asking for more than what her hands could do. Still, his pride refused to let go of control. He tested her harshly, making her fix broken fences alone, sending her to bring in cattle during a storm, ordering her to tend the fiercest stallion on the ranch. Each time she returned, tired but calm, never once complaining, never once seeking his approval. What unsettled him most was not her endurance, but her silence, the way she held herself with dignity, never chasing him as others had. One night, the storm grew fierce, lightning tearing the skies apart, and Caleb saw Eliza, struggling to pull a frightened colt into the stable before the winds could take it. Instinct drove him to her side, and together, drenched to the bone, they fought the storm and saved the animal. When it was done, Eliza collapsed against the wooden stall, her chest rising with exhaustion, and Caleb looked at her for the first time not as an intruder, but as a partner, someone who stood in the storm with him, unafraid of the wildness around him or the coldness inside him. The next morning, the ranch hands whispered that the cold cowboy had smiled just once, but it was enough to send shivers through the gossiping town. Days later, Caleb called Eliza to the porch. His voice was rough, uncertain, like a man unused to gentleness. "Why do you stay?" he asked. "You know I have nothing to give you but this land and a heart that may never heal." Eliza looked at him, her eyes soft but unwavering. "You have everything to give, Caleb. You just don't see it yet. Your land, your strength, your loyalty, they're worth more than gold. I didn't come here for riches. I came because I saw a man who was tired of being alone, but too proud to admit it." Her words broke him more than any betrayal ever had, because they carried no judgment, no demand, only truth. For the first time in years, Caleb's heart trembled. He stepped closer, his hands rough, his voice low. "I don't know if I can love again," he confessed. Eliza touched his arm, steady and sure. "You already are, Caleb. You just haven't said it out loud." Silence stretched between them, heavy yet comforting. And then something inside the cold cowboy finally gave way. He pulled her into his arms, not with the passion of a desperate man, but with the steadiness of one who had finally found home. The gates of the Whitlock Ranch that had once been a symbol of rejection now stood open, and the quiet young woman who had walked through them without fear had become the only bride he could never refuse. From that day forward, Caleb Whitlock was no longer known as the rich cold cowboy, but as the man whose heart had been thawed by silence, patience, and love. And dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. More powerful love stories, full of drama, courage, and hope, are waiting for you. Hit that subscribe button now so you never miss the next tale that just might change the way you see the world.